This video is all about Charlie's replacement angels. There were 3 of them. And you know what? They were all pretty darn great. However, before I discuss each of the 3 lovely ladies who came on board after the show was already an established hit, we've got to talk about why they were needed in the first place. And to do that, we're going to have to take a stroll down memory lane. Growing up in the late 70s and early 80s meant that you were quite likely very familiar with each of these ladies. They were Charlie's Angels, and each one of them brought something unique to the Aaron-Spelling crime drama that ran for 5 seasons on ABC. And perhaps the biggest star of them all was Farrah Fawcett. She starred on the show as the lovely, smart, and always inquisitive Jill Monroe. Along with Kate Jackson and Jacqueline Smith, she helped make the show one of the network's biggest hits. Of course, this little old poster didn't hurt Farrah's popularity one bit either. In fact, this thing turned out to be the biggest selling pinup poster of all time. Yep, between the various magazine covers and the poster rack at our local Kmart, I knew that Farrah Fawcett, then Majors, was a force to be reckoned with. Getting back to Charlie's Angels. That show was a lot of fun for a ton of different reasons. Although technically a crime drama, the stories weren't too heavy, and just like the TV Guide advertisement says, these ladies were indeed an eye-popping, crime-stopping trio. So imagine my surprise when season 2 rolled around and Jill Monroe had been summarily replaced by her younger sister Chris, played by the equally vivacious Cheryl Ladd. More on that in a bit. Anyway, at the time I didn't understand everything that was going on behind the scenes. I just knew that Farrah was gone. Although I remember hearing that Jill would pop by Townsend Detective Agency every now and again to lend a hand. So why, oh why did Farrah Fawcett leave Charlie's Angels while it was riding high in the ratings and on top of its game? Well, it really boiled down to 3 things. The first one is money. Farrah didn't feel like she was getting paid enough during that first year. From what I understand, co-angel Kate Jackson was receiving twice as much as she was per episode, and that started to bother Farrah quite a bit as her popularity increased over the course of that first season of the show. Also, she didn't love the tiny percentage of the merchandising pie that she was getting.
Have you seen Charlie's Angels? Charlie's Angels, beautiful girls who live dangerous. Sabrina, Jill, and Kelly. They're Charlie's Angels, and they've got clothes that let you imagine them in daring adventures by day and then turn them into glamorous outfits at night. Charlie's Angels. Angels, I have an assignment for you. Charlie's Angels, beautiful girls who live dangerously. New from Hasbro.
Additionally, she really wanted to make movies and be taken more seriously as an actor. That said, Farrah's transition to major motion pictures was a bit of a roller coaster ride. For every hit like The Cannonball Run, there was a movie like Sunburn. And I don't know what to make of Saturn III. I don't think it did well at the box office, but I kinda liked it. Although it took longer than originally anticipated, Fawcett put all doubts about her acting abilities to rest in the early 80s when she starred on Broadway in Extremities, and then took that newly found acting street cred to the small screen in the made-for-television movie The Burning Bed. So reason 1 was money, reason 2 was she wanted to act, and the third reason is the feller jogging alongside Farrah right here. Yep, the $6 million man. From what I understand, Farrah's contract was such that she was allowed to be done filming each day so that she could be home in time to make dinner for Lee. His opinion meant the world to her, at least at this point in their relationship. And because of that, when he started telling her that she was capable of bigger and better things, well, who can blame her for listening? Alright, one last look at the original 3 Angels. And then we gotta keep moving because we've still got a lot of territory to cover. I still remember reading about Charlie's newest angel in TV Guide. In addition to the full-page ad, TV Guide also ran an article about Cheryl Ladd as the newest angel. Her first appearance was in a 2-hour episode that sent the Angels to Hawaii, the perfect opportunity to showcase all of Ms. Ladd's talents.
Then, in a 2-hour special, Paradise opens its gates to Charlie's heavenly bodies. Angels don't do things like that.
But when Charlie's kidnapped, the angels fight to get him back. Join the Angels 2-hour special when they go to paradise.
Come on.
The premise behind Cheryl's arrival and Farrah's departure was that Cheryl played Chris Monroe, Jill Monroe's little sister, every bit as smart, feisty, and beautiful as Big Sis. During that second season, Farrah was contractually obligated to return for a handful of episodes, but Cheryl did such a great job on this show that many folks didn't seem to care that the show's biggest star was no longer solving mysteries for Charles Townsend on a weekly basis. I remember reading somewhere that shortly after Cheryl had replaced her on Charlie's Angels, Farrah commented that she was very surprised by how easily the show had been able to replace her. I think that has more to do with Cheryl Ladd than anything else. The lady was a wonderful addition to the show, and if Farrah was going to leave, I can't imagine a better casting decision. By the way, does anybody else remember this issue of Crazy Magazine? I certainly do. Crazy was a lot like Mad Magazine and a lot of fun to read. It's hard to believe that all of the magazines of this type, including Mad, have bit the dust. Anyway, getting back to Cheryl. Prior to Charlie's Angels, her first brush with fame was as a part of the animated all-girl band Josie and the Pussycats. Cheryl, pictured in the bottom right corner of the album cover, played the lovably ditzy blonde drummer in the band, Melody Valentine. As a member of Josie and the Pussycats, Cheryl had a hit album which spawned a number of singles, although I don't believe any of them charted here in the US. After Josie and the Pussycats, Cheryl started making guest star appearances on a number of primetime television programs. One of my favorite appearances was when she appeared on Happy Days, where she played a beautiful movie star that Richie wins a date with. Obviously, Cheryl is a highlight in this episode, but so is Ron Howard. There's just something about his portrayal of wholesome Richie Cunningham and how he responds to Hollywood's visit to his high school. Well, it's Happy Days at its very best. After making it big on Charlie's Angels, Cheryl leveraged her newfound fame to jumpstart that music career that had been dormant for years. Her self-titled debut album yielded a top 40 hit here in the US called Think It Over. And Cheryl was an even bigger hit musically in Japan, where a couple of her songs were played on top of the closing credits of Charlie's Angels. Cheryl became such a popular recording artist in Japan that she continued to release music over there, even when her US recording contract had ended. After Charlie's Angels came to an end, Cheryl was at a point where she could pick and choose her roles, and I've got to say she chose a doozy when she signed on to play the Hollywood actress who became royalty in the television movie Grace Kelly. More TV and feature film opportunities were to follow for the rest of the decade. And then in 1989, as Batmania took over the nation, Ladd starred in a little science fiction film titled Millennium. I have very specific memories about this movie because I went to see it with a group of friends who thought it was one of the most unintentionally hilarious movies that they'd ever seen. Truthfully, while I think the premise of the movie is very intriguing, I have to agree that the execution just wasn't there. These days, Cheryl spends a lot of her spare time on the links. Over the years, she's become an avid golfer who regularly plays on the Celebrity Pro-Am circuit. In fact, she's one of the most sought-after players worldwide, and for over 20 years has partnered with many of the world's best golfers from the PGA and LPGA tours. One of the highlights of Cheryl's golfing experiences has been the opportunity to play alongside the great Arnold Palmer. Wow, I've got to say, I'm extremely jealous of that one. Nicely done, Cheryl. Nicely done. And of course, Cheryl has never stopped acting. She's made many guest appearances on television shows over the years, and one of my favorite recent appearances by her was on the miniseries The People vs. O.J. Simpson, where she played Bob Shapiro's wife, Linnell. TV sisters, it just warms the heart seeing the two of them together, and Cheryl would stay on the show until it ended its run. Of course, the same can't be said for Kate Jackson, who decided that she wanted to focus on other projects. As a result, Shelley Hack would become the much-publicized replacement for Kate on Charlie's Angels when she left the series after Season 3. At that point in time, Shelley's face was pretty much all over the place, not just because she was Charlie's newest angel, but also because she was a model very much in high demand. In fact, before Townsend Detective Agency, the actress who played Tiffany Wells worked for another Charlie.
There's a fragrance that's here today, and they call it Charlie. A different fragrance that thinks your way, yeah, they call it kinda now. Charlie, kinda free, kinda wild. Charlie, kinda fragrance that's gonna stay, and it's here now. Charlie!
Charlie by Revlon, a most original fragrance.
Yep, Shelley was probably best known for the many advertisements that she appeared in for the Charlie fragrance for women. So with all that said, when that fourth season of Charlie's Angels debuted and the ratings began to slip, well, you know what? I blamed the slide in popularity on Ms. Hack. Some TV critics said that Shelley was just too classy for the show, and now looking back, I just really believe that the show had run its course. It really wouldn't have mattered who was brought on, as was demonstrated the next year when Tanya Roberts replaced Shelley. A few years later, Shelley would re-emerge on a CBS medical drama called Cut Her to Houston, and despite co-starring a very young Alec Baldwin, the show was not a hit. The following year, Shelley was slated to join the cast of NBC's Night Court for its sophomore season, but just days before filming was to start, she was notified that her services as district attorney Christine Sullivan would not be needed. Of course, Marky Post would go on to make that role a memorable one for 8 seasons. And through it all, Shelley was resilient. She rebounded again. As TV Guide so aptly put it on their cover, her new series, which premiered in 1986 called Jack and Mike, was one more shot at success. Unfortunately, Jack and Mike was not the career shot in the arm that she hoped it would be. As time rolled on, Shelley found roles in movies that gave her critical acclaim, most notably the suspense horror film The Stepfather. But what I find most interesting about Shelley is that, according to her own personal blog, during the 90s she took time out to step away from the limelight and get involved in media consulting for pre- and post-conflict countries. Wikipedia also reports that Shelley was a prominent figure as she worked tirelessly within these countries to help cultivate independent media channels such as newspapers, radio, and television. These are countries that previously had been reliant upon biased and sometimes wildly inaccurate content provided by state media. More recently, Shelley hosted Angels Week on A&E's biography program. She also has partnered with her husband to create a film production company called Smash Media. If you watch the Hallmark Channel and are a sucker for romantic comedies the way that I am, then you've probably seen some of the shows that Shelley has had a hand in creating. I'm especially fond of the holiday movies that show up on channels like Hallmark and Lifetime towards the end of the year. They're lightweight and fun to watch. Come to think of it, they're a lot like many of the episodes of Charlie's Angels way back in the late 70s. I mentioned earlier that Tanya Roberts was brought on to replace Shelley. In retrospect, I really do feel like Shelley got a pretty raw deal. So before we move on to Tanya, let's just take a second and admire the elegance and class that Shelley brought to the role. Okay, that's enough. Let's wrap this thing up with our final angel.
Introducing Charlie's newest angel, Tanya Roberts.
You sure know how to make a girl feel welcome.
It's triple the glamour, triple the excitement, triple the danger. In the special 3-hour season premiere of Charlie's Angels.
When Tanya Roberts came on board for the show's 5th and final season, I was rooting for it to rebound in the ratings. At the time, I remember thinking that Tanya would bring a sense of fun and whimsy that was somewhere lost along the way. There was something about her, something that made us all realize that she didn't take herself all that seriously. Unfortunately, the cover of People magazine here was right. At that point, the role was a bit jinxed, and Julie Rogers only worked for Charles Townsend's detective agency for a single season. Fortunately, that wasn't the last that we would see of Tanya. She mesmerized Mark Singer in Don Coscarelli's classic flick and late 80s home box office staple, The Beastmaster. And she parlayed that role into the jungle fantasy adventure flick Sheena, and then starred alongside Roger Moore in his final outing as Agent 007 in A View to a Kill. By the mid-80s, it seemed like Tanya was on the fast track and superstardom was inevitable. Along with a blossoming career, Roberts was madly in love with this guy. And it was Tanya who took the bull by the horns and proposed to Barry in, of all places, a subway station. Their love was truly something special. He had been studying psychology when they met, but he would follow her to Hollywood and hone his craft as a screenwriter, while Tanya continued her meteoric rise in film. However, I guess I should put meteoric rise in quotation marks because by the late 80s, things had begun to cool off a bit. And so began a string of movies that fall into the erotic thriller category. You know the kind of film that I'm talking about here. This stuff is not high art, but under the right circumstances, it's not a horrible waste of time either. Two of Tanya's biggest movies during that time were Night Eyes and Inner Sanctum. But as time went on, even those roles seemed to be fewer and far between. That said, Tanya was still able to find steady work on television. One of her biggest and most recognizable roles was on That 70s Show, where she starred as Donna's mother, Midge. On that TV show, Roberts was able to showcase that comedic talent that we had witnessed so long ago on Charlie's Angels. She truly was one of the standouts on that series. Simply put, she made every scene that she was in better. However, after the third season of that show, Tanya went from series regular to periodic guest star, and then she just kind of disappeared. So what happened, and where did she go? And why would she give up a role that had thrust her back into the limelight? Well, the answer was simple. She needed to care for her husband, Barry. You see, Barry had a viral infection called encephalitis. It's a really nasty thing. It causes the brain to swell, and there is quite a bit of suffering involved. In Barry's case, the infection was terminal, and Tanya wanted to be by his side for as long as she could. And really, who could blame her? He was the love of her life, and she wanted to be there for him in his time of need. After Barry's death, Tanya, it seems, felt less compelled to duke it out for roles on TV and in movies. Based on everything that I can see, she made a conscious decision to step away from the madness and just enjoy life. Much like fellow angel Cheryl Ladd, Tanya loved to golf. She especially enjoyed participating in charity golf events that went toward causes like the Arthritis Foundation and the Los Angeles Police Department. You may have noticed that I'm using past tense when it comes to talking about Tanya these days. That's because she passed away in January of 2021. You see, Tanya had become critically ill from a urinary tract infection that had entered her organs and bloodstream and led to a blood infection that ultimately took her life. She was still relatively young, just 65 years old at the time of her death. Such a tragedy. But that's not how I want to end this video. Let's end it here with this picture from the movie Sheena. Again, it's not going to show up on anyone's greatest movies of all time list, but it is an enjoyable movie for oh so many reasons, not the least of which is this lovely lady. Anyway, when I think about Charlie's Angels, all 5 seasons, you know what? They are really great memories, at least for me. So now it's your turn. Please share your memories in the comments section, and while you're at it, I would appreciate a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And what the heck, why not subscribe to the channel? I talk about music, movies, and mostly television from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you so much for watching.